All right, so this is a quick one-off demo on how to make things print ready. So, the most common way to do it is to know what your output paper size is. And you open up Photoshop, and if you're going to do it from a vector file, for instance, so I say if I want to print my black and white logo, for instance, I'm going to say New in Photoshop, and I'm going to label it PR to show that this is a print-ready file that I'm getting ready with my name. And I'm going to call this my black and white logo. And I want to make sure that my physical dimension is the size I want it to print within my mat. So my mat window for a standard mat is 8 by 10 inches. And since my logo is taller than it is wide, I'm going to make the paper 8 inches wide, but not 8 pixels wide, right? So make sure everything's there. So 8 inches by 11 inches. And then the resolution, that's how many pixels it's going to remember per inch. I want to set it at our lab standard, which is 350, which is 50 more than the professional standard for printing, which is 300 pixels per inch. The color mode, this is important. I want to switch to RGB color because we're not printing it with a lithographic 4-color press. We're printing on photo inkjet printers, which actually have 7 inks and can mix more colors than just CMYK. Okay, now I say okay, and I have a blank canvas of just white pixels as a background. If I'm printing from a vector file, which is the cleanest way you can do it, I need to find my vector, and I need it to be an EPS file. So I go to my documents, and all of you are asked to print one of your logos, either your color or your black and white logo. So I'm going to go to my logo folder. I'm going to find my black and white EPS, my most finished file. And if you're unsure what that is, you can arrange them by the date modified. And then you can view it by list. And you can look for the EPS that was most recently modified. I just modified this one recently. So you then drag and drop it into Photoshop. And you'll notice when you do that, it gives you, just like you remember from compositing, it gives you an X through it, which shows you it's a smart layer that needs to be placed. And it looks really rough because it's just a preview. So now you want to think of this as being your 8 by 10 matte window, the black space out here being your matte, and then you can hold down Shift and Option to grow it from the center until it looks like the right proportion of white space to black space. You can use your arrow keys to nudge it. So I center it, but then I push it up just a little bit with my arrow keys because I like to have a little bit more space on the bottom because our eyes tend to make things drop a little bit as we look at them. And then when I hit return, it will render that smart layer as cleanly as it can within the resolution I've set up. And you'll notice that it's a smart layer, so I can't alter it without rasterizing it. I don't want to rasterize it. And if I want it solid black, you want to check, because often when you build up files in Illustrator, they're not combined in black. So notice I have kind of different densities of black here. So what I can do is double click it and then do a color overlay and then select 100% black as my color overlay. In the same way, I can color the logo and print it as 100% red or whatever. But this is just going to be black and white, very straightforward, very clean. So this is on an 8 by 10 canvas, 350 pixels per inch, outputting from a vector file. So now I save it first as my print ready Carl black and white logo PSD file. And I actually prefer to save it as a TIFF when I have my print ready files. So that will save more memory. But before I save it as a TIFF, if I'm sure this is what I want, I've saved my PSD. Now I can flatten it. So I say layer, flatten image. Because you don't need extra layers when you print. It just slows down the processing, and you don't want your printer to lag or buffer while it's printing. So now that it's flattened, you'll notice I don't have a smart layer anymore, so I don't want to overwrite my Photoshop. Instead, I want to call this my print ready TIFF file. Now, TIFF is a new format for us. It's what's called an archive format. It saves memory. It compresses space as long as we use, and you always want to use this with the TIFF, LZW compression. LZW is a lossless compression format. So it compresses the amount of memory it takes, like a JPEG or a PNG or a GIF, but unlike any of those, TIFF is not an online format, and TIFF does not lose any data. It just takes a little bit longer to save and a little bit longer to open. So I'm going to show you the difference between these two files. So now I have a PR Carl black and white logo TIFF. That TIFF file, there it is. If I right click and say get info, it is only 705 kilobytes, and yet has all of the information without any distortion as this PSD file, which is 7 megabytes. So it's a tenth of the size. All right, TIFFs can also actually support multiple layers, but it doesn't really make sense to ask them to, because the whole point of a TIFF is to keep it clean for printing and to keep it all in one place. Now, what if we're printing and making print ready? So I'll put my print ready stuff over here. Actually, I'll show you where you put it. You go to the class Dropbox, which I guess you would do from Chrome. You can use the links in Canvas. So you go to dropbox.com. This is where you're going to put your print ready files. You log in. So I need to sign out of my own Dropbox here and log into the class account. And you can look up in Canvas for all the passwords. And then you're going to go to this folder, Digital Art Class Files, and then the first folder there is Flattened TIFF Files to Print. And then I've made a little document as a PDF, which gives you all the instructions for how to make something print ready, the kind of things I'm going through with you. You want to create a new folder for yourself. So even though I already have a folder, I'm going to make a little test folder here. Fall 2016. I open up my folder, and now I can just drag my TIFF files right into it. And because these Dropbox accounts are housed on our printing computers, that will make them very easy to update and print from while keeping your latest print options saved. Okay, so now let me quickly do that for an older assignment that's a raster assignment, not a vector assignment. So what do I want to print? Let's see. Maybe I want to print my creature composite. So what I need to look for is my highest resolution finished project, and that's going to be the PSD. So I'm going to open up my PSD in Photoshop. And I'm going to crop it, in this case, into a shape that I think will look best within a mat. Something like that. Hit return. I am going to flatten it because I have all these different layers. But if this is my finished, cleanest work, I am now going to flatten it and discard all the turned off layers. And I'm going to go to image size to make sure its resolution is what I need. So the first thing I do when I'm making something print ready is I uncheck resample. And that means it will just leave all of the original pixels. But now I can play with the physical dimensions. So I want to print this 8 by 10, and the limiting factor seems to be the height. So if I make the height 10, it goes beyond 8 inches. So I need to make it 8 wide, and then it's 9.42 inches. Notice I have it locked here. And if you have resample unchecked, it won't let you distort your image. You don't want to distort your image. Now, is the resolution 350? No, the resolution is moved up now because this was composited much bigger to be able to print to poster size, to 614. Now that's a lot. That might even be obscenely a lot, but that's better than having lower than 300, or worse still, lower than 240, because 240 pixels per inch is the amount at which our eye can really tell that there's a problem with it. All right, so I'm going to say OK. And now if I just want to make sure what it's going to look like within the mat, I'm going to go to canvas size, and I'm going to make it 8 by 10 with white, and that's what it would look like within the mat. And if I like that, and it's a flattened image, now I say File, Save As. I definitely don't want to save over my PSD file. And I'm going to say, call it PR, and save it to the desktop as a TIFF file with LZW turned on, always LZW. And then let's see how large that is. Because this has a lot of colors, it's going to be quite a bit bigger than the logo is. But this is only 15 megabytes, whereas the PSD it came from is 250 megabytes. So very important to flatten it and make it print ready. Otherwise, it will just take the printer forever and you won't get a good print. Okay, I need one more. I need a logo and then 2 others from the first half of class. I might go to one of my exercises. So let's go to my shape exercise, shape composition. And I'm going to go to the largest finished file. That's going to be the PSD. And notice, if I did this correctly, everything I'm showing, the only things that are turned on are shape layers, which are like Photoshop's equivalent of vectors, which is wonderful because that means they will perfectly fill to any resolution I say. So the first thing I'm going to do is say image. Before I flatten it, I want to leave them as shape layers. I'm going to go to image size. And I want this to fit within an 8 by 10 mat. It's already 10 inches wide. It's 5 inches, 5.6 inches tall. It's at 350. So that looks good. But if I have it at 10 inches tall, but not 10 inches wide, or 8 inches tall, but 10 inches wide, that means I'll have a white stripe on the top and bottom, right? So I'm going to instead, with resample unchecked, I'm going to change it down to 8 inches wide. And I'll show you why. Or maybe, I think 8 inches wide. And then I say OK. Now I go to image or canvas size under image, and I'm going to make it 10 inches wide by 8 inches tall. So it actually will show me what it looks like on a mat. But because my shapes extend beyond my form, before I do that, I need to make guides that snap to the sides. I'm not going to crop it because I don't want to lose my shape layers. Right? So now I'm going to go to canvas size, and I'm going to make it 10 inches wide by 8 inches tall with white. And now I'm going to use a new layer on top of everything with the rectangular marquee, and I'm just going to select right up to those guides, holding down Shift to mask all of my shapes. And this is to see how it will look. And I'm going to say Edit Fill with White 100% Normal. Then I can turn off my guides. That's what it would look like within my mat. And if I'm happy with that, and I am, I first save just as my Photoshop file because I haven't changed anything. And if I did change something, I made it better. I made it higher resolution. Right? And maybe I actually want to change little things, like the corner of this shape. And just bring that in a little bit. because I can do that while there's still shape layers.